week's edition of the Full-Time Roundup. On this episode, we will discuss, is Everton finished? Will Madrid win La Liga? Is this the year that the German streak for Bayern Munich is over? And so much more. Please stay with us, and here we go. Matt Gesson here with Daniel Brackett. You know, your soccer guys all the way through, European football here. We are coming at you from Elizabeth Parlor Room, potentially a spot that we will be at frequently, TBD. But either way, we will be referring to and talking about European football with you every week. Feel free to chime in and reach out to us at both of our handles on Twitter. Daniel, feel free to chime in on yours. Mine is Life of M. Gesslin. You may have heard it before on the Charlotte Soccer Show. But again, Life of M. Gesslin, and Daniel's here is
Liverpool Charlotte FC.
Perfect. We cannot, like I said, cannot wait to hear from you guys. This podcast is focusing primarily on European football, but if there are topics that you guys want to talk about as well, we're happy to include them into the show. Daniel, a little bit of background about your involvement in the game, the teams that you root for, if you want, and then I can certainly get into mine as well.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm from Raleigh. Started playing soccer at 4. Really never came back from there. So I really just focused on soccer the entire time, played up to high school, and ended up deciding to go to Charlotte, where my soccer career ended. Still play pickup here and there, and I follow the game pretty religiously. So, hey, and I'm a Liverpool fan.
That's all right. That's okay. That's all right.
Importantly, I'm a Liverpool fan, obviously a Charlotte FC fan as well. As we got that team as recently. So, Matt, you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Of course, Liverpool fan will make that work. There'll be some back and forth on the show, of course. But grew up in New York, played all my life, whether that was club team or in high school, ODP, all that stuff growing up. And then decided to kind of stay away from the sport in college, but follow it pretty religiously, as one would say. And then, to your point, Dan, once we got FC, of course, here in Charlotte, followed that team as well with the boys. We will be focusing primarily on European football. Some of the segments that we'll kind of get into, and this being the first episode, we are not wearing our kits, but we will be kind of highlighting some of the kits that we're wearing. I think one of the great things about this sport is just all the different kits that a team can wear and a player can wear, and how that kind of involves and how you got your kit. So it could be a cool topic of each week. We'll also go into a weekly review of each league in Europe, some transfer news for you guys each week, predictions about the next week as well. And then something that we're really excited about, best 11 of the weekend, player of the week for across all European leagues, and then young player of the week as well. So on top of that, we'll also have a betting section a little bit. For those of you that know me, I'm what we would classify as a cooler, so I do not actually bet. Daniel will give his predictions. I may chime in here and there a little bit, but they'll probably be primarily coming from Daniel. And then we can also always touch on things like U.S. men's national team or U.S. women's national team, of course, with the Women's World Cup just finishing up, and men's, of course, in the cycle right now for 2026 and beyond. So, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about on this show. We'd love to have you guys follow along, listen in. Again, engagement with us on Twitter if you'd like. But really wanted to just kind of touch on some of the sport across Europe, as that's really my passion. Daniel, I know you're a Liverpool fan, like you mentioned, and follow FC. I've had a few takes on MLS over the years, which we can certainly get into, but we're looking forward to chatting some European football with you.
Absolutely, and we forgot to mention this. Matt, when did you start following Chelsea?
I started following Chelsea when I was about 13, 14. So back in the day when the good teams, the Ballocks and Lampards and Drogbas and Ashley Coles, John Terrys, etc. Of course, we're reminiscing and hoping for those days to come back, but you're kind of in that moment with Liverpool the last couple of years versus what you guys had earlier on, I'm sure.
It's been sweet. It's been sweet the last 5 years. I actually became a Liverpool fan at age 7. My first classic team was Liverpool, and our coaches would quiz us on how the game went that weekend. So I started following them pretty early, kind of fell in love with the club, and really got into it probably around 11 when I understood it a little bit more. Sure. But yeah, I've been a Liverpool fan through and through, and I couldn't be more excited when Charlotte came to town, but we're going to focus on European football
Yep.
here. So shall we start?
Absolutely. So I know one of the things that we want to talk about, one of my favorite leagues, I didn't want to also mention, you mentioned Chelsea, but I do have a PSG affiliation. My dad being from France and born in Paris, they were my first team that I followed. Of course, they were newer at that time, a very young club at that point, but of course I have a dual affiliation. So of course in Champions League, if those of you have followed, PSG played Chelsea a lot in round of 16 and had to choose one or the other. So but we'll start off on England. A lot has happened in week 2. Of course, England being one of the earlier season leagues to start along with La Liga. Germany starting a little later, Italy and following last, as of last week being their first game. Daniel, first out of the gate, what were your thoughts on the first couple weeks here in the Premier League?
Well, it started quickly, it started fast, and I think that this is going to be one of the better Premier League seasons we've ever seen. It's not just going to be a top 4; it might be a top 8 in terms of just teams being elite. I think that the TV deals and the money flowing into the Premier League at this rate has just made it even more competitive, and has just really, been the top tier of European football for a while now, but now it's very evident.
Yep.
As West Ham won the Europa Conference League last year. So just a team like West Ham, who is usually known as a middle table side,
sure, yeah.
To win that, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Brighton with their recruitment, Aston Villa with all the money being spent,
Yep.
with the signings of good coaches. We've
Yep.
seen a lot of new coaches.
Yeah, a lot of new coaches.
Like Bournemouth, their coach.
Yep.
New Iriola. I think I pronounced that
Yes,
correctly.
yep.
De Zerbi came to Brighton last year. Unai Emery was
At Villa,
midway
yep,
through.
yep.
We got Vincent Kompany. Excited to see how him
With
and
Burnley, yep.
Am I missing any others? Oh, Big Ange.
Can't forget about Big Ange.
Pochettino.
Of course, yeah.
So,
Back in the Prem this year.
Yeah, it
Yep.
should be an interesting season.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned one of the teams that's really kind of stood out to us. Of course, as a Chelsea fan, I'm very familiar with them and their front office, working with them for Caicedo. Brighton seems to be the real deal. They lost 2 of their biggest pieces. I know you guys picked up one of them in McAllister. We picked up the other one, and yet they're still at the top of the table right now as we sit here and record this episode. So, it's just a testament to what a good front office can do. You have a manager, like you mentioned, in De Zerbi, who gets the best out of his players, and it's just pretty remarkable to see what a smaller, originally thought of as a mid to lower table team can do if you really put some money behind it.
Absolutely. My background is in finance, and I love a team that punches above their weight. One of my favorite books of all time is Moneyball, and you would think Billy Beane's running that team, how they've been producing.
Yep.
Especially with Caicedo, McAllister. The 2 engines of that team last year that propelled them to a top 6 finish.
Top 6 finish. Yeah, European football.
You just can't believe how they just replaced next man up mentality, and it's been really impressive.
Yeah, and of course they've kept a couple of the big pieces, right? Like Estupiñán and all those guys are still there. We'll see what happens. Matoma for now until the window closes in September. Could they be on the move? Probably not, but you never know. But yeah, they kept a couple of the big pieces. But to your point, that spine in the middle is gone. And how would they react? Everyone thought that they were going to kind of have a little bit of a setback and kind of fall down the order a little bit, as naturally would happen, but quite opposite has happened. It will be interesting to see, I think, once European football kicks in, that schedule will keep up with them. How will they keep up and kind of keep that rotation going? But for now, of course, like I said, top of the table, how can you kind of work against them at this point?
Yeah, the question really is going to be, do these teams that are kind of putting themselves in top 6 positions, will they be able to handle European football and have the depth to do that?
Yep.
I was a little worried about Brighton. I was a little worried about West Ham. A little worried about Villa, but they've all spent a decent amount, minus West Ham, but James Ward-Prowse and Edson Alvarez were huge signings.
Big signings, absolutely.
So we'll see how they fare, and obviously if they crash out early, then they'll just focus
changes
on the
things.
season.
Yep.
But if if Brighton, West Ham, Aston Villa can make a run, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think one team that we haven't talked about yet, too, as well as part of that conversation, is Newcastle, right? In Champions League this year.
Yep.
Of course, that means they at least get 3 games in the group, so no matter what, they're going to have that period. But then, adding Sandro Tonali, a couple other pieces. Of course, they had a really good, strong squad last year. Kind of where do they fit into the mix? It's going to be an interesting. You mentioned top 8. I think that's a strong statement to make. I agree with it totally. I think the Premier League, top to bottom, is going to be really, really enticing all the way through. I think even teams, we saw Sheffield United play the other day. I think that's one of the teams that we all feel pretty confident are going to go down without much of a fight. But I think Burnley's going to put up a good contest. Luton Town. That's an exciting story. First time in the Premier League in their history. I don't think they give much of a fight, but you never know.
They ever play a home game.
Yeah, if they ever play a home game. And then, of course, there are some really bad teams that, could that offset. Everton look awful.
And don't forget about they broke FFP.
Yeah.
It's coming out in October.
Yep.
They get a 5, even 10-point reduction.
Oh, yeah.
They are finished.
Over.
Thinking, what are your relegation?
My relegation teams are going to be Sheffield United, which I mentioned, Luton Town, and then I think it's really kind of between Everton and Wolves, to be honest. I think it's a really tough toss-up right there.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I think that if they do get charged for FFP and there's any point reduction, then that kind of explains that, and they will be that 18th position.
Yep.
Now, Wolves impressed me. First game of the season against Man U.
Got robbed.
They got
point.
robbed by
Yep.
Onana. But then they were completely awful against Brighton. That's why, are we thinking Brighton's the real deal?
I think they're still kind of in that same boat of where they were last year. I think if they do maintain that top 6 position with European football in the mix, I think that's a great success for them. If they continue and focus on Europe, I think they slip a little bit just because of the wear and tear, the rotation, the lack of depth for the team, and what that European model looks at. But I do think if they can kind of balance and maybe crash out a little early in Europe, I think they still stay in the top 6. But yeah, I think they're the real deal as far as what they have available to them at this point.
I think the 2 biggest things for Brighton is, number 1, apparently Enciso might be out for
the season. Saw that today, yeah.
Really bad for them, especially because I think, in my opinion, they lack a number 10.
Yeah.
And he was that guy, even at 19. Also, the thing with what I worry about Brighton is De Zerbi. Can they keep him all season, or is another club going to come and buck him up?
Yep.
Potterville.
Yep.
So I think Brighton's biggest thing is keeping De Zerbi, keeping people healthy, and then just surviving the European competition.
Agreed.
Now that we rotate out of Brighton, Arsenal and City, they got it done. What do you think? Any thoughts?
I mean, City's a power, right? I think what Pep has designed there and the team, and huge news coming out of Manchester this week was Bernardo Silva and Kyle Walker re-signing deals there. I think if they lost both of those guys, I think that's a whole different dynamic. Of course, Kevin De Bruyne out for an extended period of time with that hamstring surgery, but the depth there and what Pep has built and the players they have, I still think that they, even if they kind of maintain second, third, maybe won't be as dominant as we all expect, but if they can kind of keep things afloat until Kevin De Bruyne comes back, I think they're still the team to beat. Arsenal made a lot of moves in the offseason. I think everyone's a little bit hesitant to kind of crown them. We don't know what to expect from Kai Havertz, Chelsea guy as well from last season, which didn't really deliver much, and 2 games in hasn't done much either. So they made some good moves. Will they pan out? We'll see. Who's going to be their number 1 keeper at the end of the season? A lot of questions that they've kind of either self-imposed or created for themselves, and it'll be interesting to see. But Arsenal are on the rise as a club. I think Arteta knows what he's doing. It's just maybe it may not be their time right now with this season.
I think the biggest thing if we're talking about Arsenal, I think the biggest thing is playing Havertz in the position of why he went to the Premier League. Chelsea got him because he was a number 10 for Leverkusen, and he is phenomenal at that. When you ask him to play the 9, that's when you struggle.
Agreed.
He's not an out-and-out goal scorer. He's an assister. His movement, his elite movement, his link-up play is good. So he is not a goal scorer. Should not play him unless you were to play a false 9. which even then I'm still uncomfortable. I think he should play 10, so
Yeah.
it's up to Gabriel Jesus and Ketia Balogun maybe to
If he stays,
hold the
yeah.
weight with the goals.
Yeah.
I don't think Balogun will be staying.
Yep.
And so they both got it done.
Yes.
1-0 each game.
Yep.
Arsenal had more, let's say, hurdles to jump through.
Yep.
With the pretty shocking red card or 2 yellows from Tomiyasu. I thought they were pretty soft.
Yep.
I don't know if you agree.
Yep.
So they got it done. That's huge to start the season. Just get it done, get a W. No one cares about anything except the 3 points.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned the Kevin De Bruyne injury. He's 32.
Yeah.
Is this the year that Foden steps into the Kevin De Bruyne?
I mean, this is where I mentioned earlier City's depth and what they've built. If this is the question that we're talking about, is Kevin De Bruyne for Phil Foden. That's a good problem to have for any team in the Premier League, right? Definitely hear your point on KDB, as we'll call him, just to make it short for everybody. I think that's how everyone calls him almost anyway. 32, you know, there was rumors of him going maybe to Saudi in the summer.
I didn't see that.
It was kind of quiet, but it was still out there. What is it going to look like? Of course, Saudi, we can talk about later, kind of gobbling up anyone and everyone with that money that they can throw at you. So there was some conversation. I think Phil Foden is the real deal. I think they also have a guy named Cole Palmer, who's been fantastic.
2 game winners.
2 game winners already. Now, you mentioned both teams getting things done. I think City were the more impressive between those two. You go.
They played the harder opponent.
That was where I was going. They played the harder opponent in Newcastle, win at home. To be honest, a pretty boring game from a neutral perspective. But you get the W, and that's all that matters. And they beat Burnley 4-0 on the road in the first game. Arsenal playing Forest and kind of getting a squeaky win there, and then going back next week and getting that 1-0 win. So again, very early in the season. You know, we haven't even gone to Chelsea and Liverpool and Spurs yet, and kind of what their impact will be in the season. But you know, I think there's still a lot of room for all the teams to grow. You know, and so to your point, yes, Foden will step in and deliver because that's what he's done. But I think the sky's the ceiling for that kid, and where they go really kind of depends on everything else.
England's future number 10.
Yep. And then, so like I mentioned, we haven't even gotten to some of the new, bigger storylines in that other top 6. Of course, we can save the Chelsea struggles for another day, but we can certainly talk about them. There have been struggles for a long time. I think Mauricio Pochettino coming back to the Premier League is a huge get for us. Of course, you know, we thought we had the answer with Thomas Tuchel and also Graham Potter last year. Things didn't work out. I think that's partly on the ownership and all the stuff that happened, and Todd Bowley being a little underwater and out of his depth right out of the gate. But I do think that Poch will come in. Of course, the youngsters, that's what he likes. You know, I think that's something that he's really happy with, and has the ability to kind of mold and shape the teams the way he wants to. So I think we'll be stronger this year. Probably not top 4 unless we get a little lucky here and there. But personally, as a fan, and I know it's hard to say because, of course, the goal is always to win it and be in the top 4. But if I'm being realistic, if we finish in Europe football, that's a successful season for us.
So what is not a successful season?
Man, if we just keep playing the same way, and that's kind of one of the things that I was took out of the West Ham game, who looked really good the other day. But I think you saw what we were trying to do. You saw a system and a style that we wanted to play, which last year I don't think we ever really had. Now, like I said, if it doesn't turn out, we finish in the bottom half again, that's a failure. Of course, that's Chelsea. We should be in the top half every season. You know, what's been going on there is totally unacceptable. We're used to winning under the Roman era. Again, we're in a different era now with Bowley and their organization, what they're trying to achieve, and the structure of the club, etc. So yeah, I think, you know, anything less than 8th is a failure for us. But I don't think, you know, 8 to 5 is probably our window for this year, and that would be I would take that, to be honest.
Okay, because I just don't think there's no way you guys get European football.
Interesting.
this year.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I actually had you guys 9th.
Okay. All right. So pretty close, but I'll take it.
Close.
Yeah.
I will say I am a Poch believer, but I'm not a Chelsea believer at this moment.
Well, you're a Liverpool fan, so that's
I am a
natural.
Liverpool
That's
fan.
natural.
Non-biased. Non-biased. But I mean, I guess if you can get some of those youngsters to step
Yeah.
up, then I guess you could rebound. Now, I think the biggest game is the next game,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep.
And so, can you get it done against Luton? That is the question of the day.
Let's just say this: if we can't get it done against Luton at home,
work
there's
is
going to be a lot of issues. But yes, I agree with you. Probably, like you said, I think a little better than ninth, but kind of in that same range. There are a lot of youngsters, still a lot of injuries. Of course, Christopher Nkunku out again,
That does hurt.
which hurts. That's he was looking really good in preseason.
Might have to get used to it.
Yeah, I know it's a Chelsea striker curse a little bit, but hopefully we can get over that. Again, we've had a couple more injuries. Kearney out for a month after last game with a little minor knee surgery, probably meniscus. Don't know the exact extent of it, but again, we just got to stay healthy. We got people picking up injuries all the time, but another team that kind of is coming back from last season, a disappointing season, is your Liverpool. You mentioned kind of where we would land in our table, but where do you see your guys finishing this year?
Pre-transfer window close, I see us at third.
Okay.
But, I mean, obviously everyone knows why Liverpool was bad last year.
Yep.
Because the midfield.
Yep.
And the lack of investment there. And we might have signed McAllister, Szoboszlai, now Endo, new signing. But is that going to be enough? I just don't think so. I think that we got to swing for the fences. I think that there's a list of 7 names, 8, 10 names that I'd be okay with as a center defensive mid. But Endo and relying on an injury-prone 30-plus-year-old Thiago and then an 18-year-old Basetic is not going to be the answer.
Yep.
So, especially as it pains me to say, even in Europa League. So, haven't heard that word in a long time as a Liverpool fan. But I do think that after losing the Europa League to the owners of the Europa League, Sevilla, I think that Klopp is going to be very bullish on winning that, and so we'll see how the season goes. I mean, I thought, talking about last week, Bournemouth come back, went down 1 because we were playing rubbish for the first 15 minutes, but we kind of figured it out. I mean, we've been playing 4 up top. So a little bit concerning with that, but now with the Endo, he got some minutes in. I think that he's actually going to start next week, and someone's going to have to get dropped. Who that is, I couldn't tell you. That's why they pay Jurgen millions
of dollars.
Zero. But I will continue to commentate from the sidelines.
Any concern on Trent Alexander-Arnold? Of course, the back line's been a little bit suspect the first 2 games. You mentioned the midfield last year being the problem. I think you guys have kind of solved that a little bit this season from what we've seen. Of course, the Chelsea match was a great, exciting first match. I think everyone was really running wild with where both teams could go. Of course, last game was more of a setback for both, I think, and kind of a realization like, hey, let's slow the brakes a little bit. But what did you take away from, you mentioned a slow start again in the back. I think that may be one of your Achilles heels as a neutral or anti-Liverpool fan. Kind of what are your thoughts there? Is that more of a concern than the midfield right now?
I think it's more of a system thing.
Okay.
I think that if we're going to play this hybrid 3 with possession and invert Trent into the midfield, I think Robertson is not equipped for that role. I think we also need to sign a left center back in that. What we need is at least one more defensive midfielder and a left center back. Now, Ibrahima Konate and Virgil are fantastic, but depending on 32, 33-year-old Joel Matip and a Joe Gomez who's just been inconsistent, injury prone, that's just not going to get it done. We have no Trent replacement really. We do have a Robertson replacement, so I think if we just reverted to the 4-3-3, I think that leakiness out of the back would be solved.
Sure.
But that also means we have to have a 6.
Yep.
Are we going to rely on a 29-year-old Endo who wasn't captain for his Bundesliga side? Well, is he an elite player who's going to carry us to Champions League football?
Right. Can he compete in the Premier League?
We'll
That's the question, right?
We will see.
Yeah.
And the game was kind of done and dusted by the time he came on against Bournemouth, so I guess he'll probably start this week, and I guess we'll have that answer next week.
Sure. One quick team I want to talk about real quick before we get into another team that can kind of segue us into a different league is Man United. Of course, I think we're both pretty anti-Man United in our own fandoms, but just some quick thoughts on their first 2 games and what Erik ten Hag's doing over there in Manchester.
I will never understand, because I can look at this logically. How do you sell for it?
Right.
With that midfield situation?
Right.
How do you do that? And then you got...
And Mason Mount's now hurt as well, so he's out till after the break.
And then you got Casemiro looking a solid 10 pounds heavier than he was last year. A lot slower. I just don't understand how that club is run. I thought Ten Hag would come in and kind of fix things, and I think he's improved the squad. I think he's improved how they play. But some of the questions this year, why is he playing Rashford at the 9? Why, like that midfield? I just don't understand it.
Yeah, and it was a little bit disappointing. Of course, they got the steal of a win against Wolves. We saw what they really kind of are right now against Spurs last week, which was pretty awful, to be honest. And I think that's a concern, considering, to your point, they had a full off season with Erik ten Hag now, and yet they still look like the same Manchester United last year, which we all complained about. So that's a little concerning. Again, not the end of the world for us if they finish outside the top 6, but it's Man United. They'll find a way. But one team I do want to talk about, I mentioned here briefly, is Spurs. They have Big Ange now in there. Of course, a few pieces that moved on that we'll get to in a second. But any quick thoughts on how Spurs have started the last 2 games? It's a totally different team than what we've seen.
Yeah, so we've seen Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho. And you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum now with Ange Postecoglou, the ex-Celtic manager. I wasn't able to watch Spurs that much, but I've read plenty of articles on Big Ange, and what I've seen so far, I watched the whole Brentford-Tottenham game. That was enjoyable, 1-2. I wasn't able to catch much. I watched the highlights of the Man United-Tottenham game, but what I will say, Yves Bissouma.
Fantastic in the midfield.
He was...
bossing the
He's
game.
not a new signing, but he is a new signing. And he is the exact midfielder that Ange wants. I think that Richarlison's got to step up, but he will. I think that the attack will come with time, but their free-flowing football, the confidence, and players who were awful last year, like an Emerson Royale, he's reinvented a lot of these players, and I'm actually pretty excited to see what they can do this year.
It will be interesting. You mentioned Yves Bissouma, of course, a fantastic midfield player, center, defensive midfield. I think a player that Liverpool could use and would be perfect.
Brighton.
Yes, from Brighton again. John Hayes on Charlotte Soccer Show mentioned on his Twitter handle just how perfect of a player he would be for a team like Charlotte FC. So again, just a great kind of controller of the game. Has done a great job there. But I do think, going back to the Spurs kind of new look, one of the things that does concern me is in the back. I think they're very open. They're much more advancing forward, like you mentioned. But are those center backs and those fullbacks going to be strong enough to keep things in check? That'll be the real test for Spurs going forward. And of course, the one answer and one question mark that everyone's going to have is who's going to score their goals, right? You mentioned Richarlison, I think. Pretty average player, I think a little overhyped, and personally his own hype is kind of what got him there and what got this whole thing started. But of course, when you lose a player like Harry Kane, who's now in the Bundesliga at Bayern Munich, that's going to be an interesting dynamic for them. And how do they kind of, take that and kind of get those goals? Sonny's a great player, but can he carry and score 35, 40 goals and replace Harry? I don't think so.
But the one thing I will say about Ange Postecoglou's sides is they're so free-flowing. It's almost like there's not a position.
Right.
You just kind of fill in the position that's needed. And so when you play that type of football, you don't really need one man to score. You just have confidence in your team, and the team is confident, the goals will come. Now, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say that Son does not have to score at least 10 to 15 goals a season for them, but in the big moments, obviously you want a Son or a Kulusevski, or we even mentioned James Madison to pop up. But when it comes to the goals, I think that the goals will just come however they come. But they will need help from their big new signing, James, and Son and Co. And Richarlison working in 7-10 goals.
If he can get that, it'd be fantastic. Well, switching gears a little bit, I mentioned Harry Kane and where he's off to now in the Bundesliga at Bayern Munich. first, of course, getting a goal and an assist, looking as if that's just Harry Kane doing Harry Kane things. Any thoughts on Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga? Of course, opening match victory against Werder Bremen, and then just 4-0, just ho hum Bayern Munich off to the normal start.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, as a Chelsea fan, I don't know where you stand with Tuchel, but I never really have been a fan of Tuchel.
Yep.
I respect him as a manager. He won the UCL, and Chelsea, I don't think deserved to win the UCL.
Sure.
But I will say that I have a hot take, and I think that he might not last the year, even with this big 4-0 win.
Fair enough. Wow, interesting.
I mean, they got absolutely drubbed against Leipzig.
Yep.
And I don't even know what that competition
A Polka Cup or a Super Cup.
The Super Cup. So
Yep.
the German Super Cup.
German Super Cup.
Which is the Polka winner and the Bundesliga
Correct.
winner.
It's basically the Community Shield of
Yeah.
German football.
Yeah. So I was very worried for them. I figured they'd win against Werder Bremen. Now, it was 0-0 all the way to the 70th minute, and they piled on at the end. I think that he can have spats, as you know, with players. And I've already seen reports of Kimmich having trouble, and that's the heart of that team. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how he does. I think the formations he plays will suit an Alphonso Davies.
Yeah.
But like when it comes to like say a Musiala, I don't know if how they play will suit him.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think they're gonna win their umpteenth Bundesliga.
That would be 11 in a row if they
11
win
in a
this
row?
season.
Okay.
Yep.
But I do think that this is the most competitive Bundesliga there will be
Agreed.
in years.
I agree with you on that. And I know we talked about it offline a little bit earlier, that we both don't have them winning the league this year, although that may have changed. But we mentioned RB Leipzig as I had RB Leipzig. I think you had RB Leipzig.
I had them second.
Second? Okay. So, but to your point, it will be much more competitive this season in the Bundesliga. Of course, Dortmund off that disappointing last minute, let's call it a bottle of the season last season, unfortunately. They scrape by and get their win. A Malen goal in the last, 88th minute, I think it was, off a corner. So they're back, undefeated, of course. A great game in Bayern Leverkusen and RB Leipzig. Leverkusen getting the better of Leipzig, which was surprising, especially after you mentioned that 3-0 win in the Super Cup.
Was it?
I don't know. It'll be interesting. We'll see. As I know we've talked about this. Leverkusen, of course, a great, talented team always. Since I've been around watching the Bundesliga, but they always find a way to kind of shit the bed, essentially. And so this game was a big game for them against Leipzig. Granted, first game of the season. Let's not overreact. But a big win against arguably a top contender in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, well, you said don't overreact. I'm going to overreact. You said that Leverkusen had bottled it before in years past. I think that they were, if I remember correctly, before Xabi Alonso, they were not in a great place.
Nope, they were not.
Xabi Alonso, ex-Liverpool legend. I kind of took his first big role.
Yeah,
at Leverkusen.
yeah,
He was
big
the
role.
Real Sociedad B coach, I believe.
Correct,
For
yeah.
that. So I made a huge jump to like a top 6 Bundesliga team, and man, do they play pretty football.
They do, yep.
I think that the likes of in Frimpong, they signed Bonifaci.
Yep.
I think I pronounced that
Yep.
right. Vert's getting the number 10 this year.
And he's a player to watch, by the way.
He will not be there for very
Yep.
much longer. I expect him to be like almost like a Kai Havertz.
Yep.
And be out of there with 60 million plus after the season. And the fact that they scored 4 goals without Diaby, which was their key guy last year. I just think that, I don't know if you remember this, but every single game of Leverkusen last year, it was like 70% of their forward runs were on the right side with Frimpong and Diaby.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, because there was rumors of Frimpong going somewhere else.
Yep, at one point,
They lose both.
That's over. That's over. Yeah.
But now that they got Jonas Hoffman from Borussia Mönchengladbach, which is a very low-key signing.
Yep.
Haven't heard much about it, but he carried them.
Carried
last
them,
year.
yeah.
And then you sign a guy like Xhaka, who's had Premier League experience. won a couple trophies with Arsenal.
Yep.
Arteta Ball, I feel like is a little
Swiss international as well,
Swiss
captain.
international
So
captain.
yep.
So I think having that experience and having him in the heart of the midfield after a fantastic season that no one expected.
Yeah.
With Arsenal, I think that they are maybe my favorite team to watch in the Bundesliga.
Fair enough. And a league that, we mentioned Bayern Munich kind of dominates, looking at their 11th in a row, which is a little bit, unfortunate, but a league that is entertaining. If you want to watch goals and have a good time, maybe the style of play isn't for everybody, but goals galore. I think there was a 4-4 game already this season, a 97th minute penalty equalizer.
Yep.
So craziness in the Bundesliga all around.
And there was 4-4, 3-2, 1-2, 5-0, 2-0, 1-0 on the first match day on that Saturday. I don't know. That's like MLS score lines right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm here for it. And before we move on, I did want to mention this. Give me a second. Sorry about this. So Union Berlin, Mainz. I don't know if you caught that game.
I did not. No.
So they won 4-1.
Okay.
And Aronson got the nod, played 76 minutes, but we won't even talk about that. So their striker, 32-year-old Kevin Behrens, scored a hat trick.
Okay.
With a 9.6 rating on FootMob. But the funniest thing is that I haven't seen in a long time, Mainz's striker missed 2 penalties, 2 saves.
2 penalties.
2 saves from the keeper.
Jeez.
I don't think I've ever seen that in my entire life.
2 is hard. I mean, 1 I can see, especially if you made the first one, we saw it with Harry Kane in the World Cup, you take that second penalty, you're thinking a little bit in your head, keeper kind of has an idea, but to miss both, that's painful.
And they weren't even retakes.
Oh.
They were just different times. He went right, and then he went left and missed both.
Jeez Louise.
And I actually saw his mouth. He said, "For fuck's sake," after.
Yeah,
so
I would too at that point. I would too. Well, that's a great segue into a team that looked like they may not score this season, which is very surprising for them. Barcelona in La Liga finally got a 2-0 win after a 0-0 draw against Getafe in the first week, but really, really struggled in this game again to score some goals. They scored a late, essentially winner in the 75th minute, I believe it was, from Pedri, a beautiful goal.
By Gundogan.
Oh, that ball was
Class.
that little ticky-tacky football is what you're looking for. But it really was a struggle. Robert Lewandowski, Louis as some of us call him, hasn't gotten on the score sheet yet. Looks a little lost. Concerning. Yeah, a little bit. A little slow start for him. Any thoughts on Barca at this point? Of course, we'll get into Madrid here in a second and the rest of La Liga. But any thoughts on Barca and what they're getting done?
I just think that when you are in the financial state that Barca are in because of over-leveraging and this and that.
You mean you don't want to pull all the levers and figure out how many they have?
I mean, I don't even think a U.S. accountant for a top company could even pull levers like they've done. But I think that the first thing I wanted to mention was Lamine Yamal.
Yeah.
He gets the nod, and who does the 16-year-old La Masia kid get the nod over? He gets the nod over Ferran Torres. Gets the nod over Ansu Fati.
Yep.
Another La
big
Masia,
question marks there. Yep.
And Izawali.
Yep.
I butchered that.
Yep.
But that was crazy. I mean, people have their own arguments. Should a 16-year-old be put in the limelight? It's arguably the most popular club in the world.
Yeah.
But I thought he looked good. They struggled to create.
They did.
With the low block.
Yep.
It's a lot harder, but it's also Barcelona.
Right.
And I think that since Messi left, they still don't have that one guy who's just going to put it on his back.
Yeah.
I think Lewandowski can't do it on his own. He needs service.
He needs service,
at
right.
This age
Exactly, yep.
that he's at.
Yep.
I think that Pedri and Gavi look decent, but I just think that they need that extra oomph, and I don't know where that's going to come from.
Yep.
Especially when you sell maybe the player he wasn't always on the pitch, but Dembele.
Yep.
He was kind of that player for them at times. I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of Ferran Torres.
And he got the second goal, of
and
course.
He got the second goal, and I think that apparently there's a report I was actually reading right before I came here. He's doing double sessions, just probably the most professional player at Barca at the moment. So, is he going to be the guy who steps up this year? when they need it the most.
Yep.
Because as of now, it's looking like Real Madrid are the favorites.
And they're going to need someone to step up. Of course, a report came out this morning that Pedri's now going to be out for a month with a quad injury. So he'll be out, until after the international break. So that's a struggle for them. And again, they have not looked good here. Of course, it's early on. Let's not get crazy. Let's not overreact. Again, like we mentioned before, I think that's the theme of the early season. But one team that does look good, and of course, big signings, potentially another signing that we don't want to get into. We'll talk about it later maybe. But Real Madrid and Jude Bellingham, and he's kind of just filled right in. Hey Jude, yeah, exactly. He's just filled right in. And you talk about youngsters. You mentioned it with Barcelona. This kid is 19 years old. I think maybe just turned 20. Either way, he's still a young kid taking on the lead role at one of the most famous, if not the most famous club in the world. And boy, did he deliver, and has he looked good, man. He just fits right in with this Real Madrid squad.
He is 20 years old as of June 29th. The crazy stat is he did not even play for Dortmund in his 20s.
Mm-hmm.
He was the key cog last year for Dortmund, pushing on the league, and it was not his fault they choked. But Jude, he has 2 matches, 3 goals, 1 assist.
Yep.
An average rating of 9.0.
Yeah. And Carlo Ancelotti mentioned it today. We're okay without Karim Benzema because we have a guy like Jude Bellingham. And you mentioned his age, 20 years old, and putting that much pressure on a kid to deliver, and he has delivered.
And he's not even a striker.
Yeah, not even a striker.
Not even a striker.
Yep.
So, I mean, God, what do I even start with Madrid? I mean, starts out pretty rough. You get a Courtois and an Eder Militao, both ACLs gone for the season.
Plus, like I mentioned, Karim Benzema, your leading goal scorer, gone from last season.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, those are anyone that will win Dior.
Yeah.
Let's not forget
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, I was thinking they were doomed. Not doomed, but I was obviously thinking Barca would probably be able to edge them this season.
Yep.
And Carlo does it again. The Italian mastermind with that beautiful one eyebrow raise. Man, I mean, Camavinga.
Yeah, another player, yeah.
Toni Kroos and Modric rolling back the years. That Kroos assist on that Jude goal, man.
Fantastic.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Even their left back, they're deep. They've been deep into the academy system.
Yep.
With their left back, because Ferland Mendy's out.
Yep.
So they do have some injuries, and rotation is going to be a question because can you take out Jude, Vinny Jr., and Rodrigo all in one swoop since you don't have a Marco Asensio anymore?
Yep.
So it's going to be a question, and there's still that passing the baton over from the young to the old. I think this is the year that it actually happens to Tchouaméni or to
Tchouaméni, yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's a tricky one.
It is. The French background helps. So, I mean, he got the nod last week.
Another youngster too, by the way. Same with Camavinga. That midfield for the future is, you mentioned the changing of the guard, Toni Kroos and Modric, but you got 3 youngsters that are going to come in and look just as stellar as those 2.
It's ridiculous, and I think there's no better manager to bring them through that period than Carlo.
Yeah.
Even though he might be on his way out to the Brazilian national team after this year, I think he's going to get out with a bang.
Totally. Any other thoughts on La Liga? I think of course, Atleti Madrid are going to be around, and maybe Sevilla, although they had a pretty bad loss.
Goal fest, though.
Goal fest. But any other thoughts on La Liga, or is it really just a 2-team race per usual this season?
I think it's going to be a 2-dog race, but I do think that Atletico Madrid will get that. I mean, you basically should just call third Atletico Madrid. I think that, obviously, Griezmann. I think that Rodrigo de Paul, Marcus Llorente, Memphis Depay starting to get more game time. I think that they're going to be a fantastic team. Now, I just don't think that they can. Especially the draw against Betis this weekend.
Yeah.
It's just like they needed to win that, even if they're on the road. I think. I don't think Sevilla are going to be that good from what I've seen.
Yep.
Quick story. When I was in Spain last summer, that was the only game I got to go to. The Sevilla Athletic Bilbao, last game of the season to fight for Champions League spot.
Oh, wow. Fantastic game.
It was a fantastic stadium, very family atmosphere, very intimate. And so they're kind of the team I prefer to watch in La Liga. Now, obviously, you can't turn off Barca versus Real Madrid.
Right,
but just for that, I do like Sevilla. But that's really it from La Liga for me.
And I mean, that's kind of how it boils down to, right? And
Yeah.
you mentioned Germany being somewhat similar, of course, maybe a little tighter this year at the top 4. Spain is usually top 3 with that 4th team kind of just there as 4th. You mentioned a team and a couple players that have kind of gone over and transitioned. Ousmane Dembele, now at PSG in France, of course. Their struggles continued this past season, tying Laurent in the first game of the season without Kylian Mbappe, that whole saga. We can do an entire episode on that. Any thoughts on PSG's struggle to start? Well, we can certainly get back into Serie A at the end. I think there's a lot that's packed there. But any thoughts on PSG and kind of how Ligue 1 has started?
So I do think that obviously last match day with Toulouse.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Toulouse, you don't start Dembele, you don't start Mbappe. This is kind of what we expected.
Yeah.
But they did get put on in 60th, 70th minute.
Yep.
Tied it up. Hakimi kind of gave up a pretty stupid pen.
Yep.
But I do think with Luis Enrique, I do think with Kylian Mbappe staying this
Yep.
season and Dembele, especially being in his home country, will he kind of get back to his best?
Yep.
I actually do think so. They got Ugarte.
Yep.
Fantastic player.
Uruguay player.
Skriniar
Yep.
was a good signing. Obviously Nuno Mendes, Hakimi.
Yep.
They got some guys for sure. I mean, they've also had some. I wouldn't say flops, but I would say Fabian needs to step up.
Yep.
Can you name a few more? Itakike looks on
Yep.
his way out.
Yeah, on his way out. Yeah, I think so. Yep.
But I'm trying to think if there's anyone more. I mean, Vitinha, you'd like to see him do
Yep.
more.
Yep.
So we'll see if they can get it done this year. I obviously think they will.
Sure.
But other than PSG struggles, is there anyone else you're going to be watching?
Marseille is an interesting team. They made some good moves in the offseason. They're always kind of one of those teams that are hit or miss at the top and kind of give PSG a fight. Of course, PSG, like I mentioned at the top, has kind of been a more relatively new team to Liga. Of course, they've been around, but this dominance has kind of been more recent. Marseille being the more traditional dominant player in France. I think they'll kind of have a stronger season. Last year was a little bit of kind of up and down for them, more so than they're used to. I think Monaco will be strong again. Kind of under the radar as always. They don't really do many flashy signings, more so kind of through the academy and younger players. Lyon are terrible. I think another team that's going to be pretty poor is Strasbourg, is affiliated with Chelsea now as a kind of ownership group, same team.
Didn't they sign a bunch of guys?
Yeah, and I think they're going to kind of loan each other out and back and forth and kind of be like a little farm system. But, PSG is really the class of Ligue 1. Of course, there's going to be a story, and if Mbappe plays, if he stays, there's so many players on the outs, Verratti and Julian Drexel, and just so many guys that kind of, are the class of France from a club side. So I think, they'll kind of run away with it. Maybe some issues towards the end of the season, especially as this Mbappe Saka comes back. But I think Luis Enrique is the right guy for the job. I think one of the things for PSG's perspective is, can they be a team? They've always kind of had this mentality of buying a team versus kind of creating a team culture and atmosphere. So I think if Luis Enrique can kind of get that going, I think Liga is never their question. It's always Champions League for PSG, and that'll be where they're really measured is Champions League versus Liga.
I do think that the first step, and you said, do they play as a team?
Yeah.
Not only did they get rid of Messi,
Yeah,
not rid
and
of
Neymar
Messi,
too.
but they got rid of Neymar
Yep.
and Saudi. So
Yep.
I think that's going to help. I think that Mbappe doesn't like to be challenged. I think he likes to be the alpha in the room, and I think that they got people around him, especially his French compatriot Dembele, that will help. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about Monaco.
Yeah.
As a Chelsea fan, you've got Disasi and
Yep. Who looks great, by the way.
The two guys that have stepped right up.
Yep.
I gotta look at their names, but I do think that there also have been a little rumor mill that Balogun could be on his way to Monaco, especially with the whole thing that's going on with Ben Yedder right now, with his recent maybe crimes. So, I mean, Taki Minamino has come off the mark pretty good so far. He scored a brace last weekend. They signed was it Dennis Sakari?
Yes, they did. Yes, correct.
Yeah,
yes.
so that's. I think he's going to have to reinvent himself in France.
Yep.
So I actually, especially if they get Balogun and they can stay healthy, I think that Monaco can do good. Now,
Can they push PSG, or is it really just kind of like a second
it
team?
depends on Balogun.
Okay.
Because if they don't sign Balogun and Ben Yedder obviously gets arrested or jailed, then I think they're gonna. Well, I mean, the reports are bad. So, I mean, if he's not in the picture and they don't sign a guy, then I think they're in big trouble.
Yep.
But I think that if they sign Balogun and he picks up where he left off at Reims, I think that they are going to be just fine. Now, I will name a team that disappointed me a little bit this weekend, but I think they're my dark horse for challenging.
Okay.
Rennes.
Okay.
I think Rennes has made some absurdly good signings. They've
Strong last year too, by the way.
very strong last year. Lens, because they played Lens, who sold Openda, they sold their Fofana to Saudi. But I just want to name a few signings that they did.
Yeah.
They signed Blas from Nantes. He was fantastic last season, their best player. They have Amin Gori.
Yep.
Calomendo Muniga. They signed Enzo Lefebvre from Lorient.
Yep.
And then Beauregard in that midfield. I mean, it's pretty
Pretty solid. Yeah.
That's pretty stacked.
Yep.
And they've done it low key. They just signed the veteran Matic from Roma.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they did sell Doku.
Yes.
But I don't think that matters too much because I think they probably I would figure them to reinvest a little bit.
Yep.
Or maybe from the signings from earlier this summer, that was
their way of cutting it. Yeah, exactly.
Going even basically.
Exactly.
So and Martin Terriers had a fantastic season last year. He's been injured, but when he comes back,
it's like an extra signing.
It's going to be the extra signing where they lost that Doku hole.
Yep. Yep. It's a great call. I mean, Rennes was, like I said, a strong team last year in Liga. Of course, PSG came back to the field a little bit and then stretched it out. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what that gap is. I still think they're the team to beat, but Liga is getting more competitive, getting stronger. So it'll be interesting to see. You mentioned, Manuel Matic coming over from Roma. We haven't touched on the Serie A yet. Of course, they're the last league to start. Last week was their first game. Any thoughts briefly on Serie A? We can, would love to kind of let that league kind of get into the season to kind of before we start kind of getting really into it. But any takeaways from week one?
You mean Serie USA?
Yeah, Serie USA.
Because,
yes.
Where can I start? You got Milan getting the duo Pulisic and Musa. They had a great first game. Pulisic looked back to his old self. Giroud, Leao. I picked them personally to win the league.
Okay.
Now they look good. Napoli with their new coach looked pretty solid.
Pretty solid. You would think they would have taken a step back,
I was thinking they would.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of their hire. I thought they could have done better with the coach, but they were back to winning ways without Kvaratskhelia.
Yep. Well done on the pronunciation, by the way. That's a hard one. That's a hard one.
Inter Milan looked pretty good. I mean, after that Champions League final loss, I was even calling for. I think they could be better on the coach with Inzaghi, but then he drags them to the Champions League final.
Yeah, exactly.
So much about that. Lautaro Martinez and Burrell look their usual selves.
Yeah.
And I think that Juve, with no European football, can play better. I mean, I don't like Juve because I cannot stand Allegri.
Yeah.
Or Allegri, because they're anti-football.
Yeah.
But do you have any talking points of the teams I just mentioned?
I mean, of course, Milan. I think the Milan teams are going to be strong. You mentioned Inter going to the Champions League final, AC adding the players they did, not only Chikwueze, and then also Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Not a terribly flashy signing, but I think adds depth to that midfield for them. Yeah, exactly. So again, early in Serie A season, quick top four, pretty standard, or
I'm gonna go with Milan, AC Milan, Napoli,
okay,
probably Inter,
okay,
and then I'm gonna go with Fiorentina.
Okay. Well, that's a dark horse. We'll see how that pans out for the rest of the season. That is a hot take, but we'll see.
You got Lazio, Atalanta, and Roma. I think this is the best.
This is a good Serie A.
I've seen in
Yeah.
a long time.
Now you have to get Paramount Plus, which is a different conversation about it, but we'll save that for another time.
Shout out to my father.
Well, while we're on predictions, predictions for this week. There's a couple games that are up there. Of course, our two teams are playing. Chelsea play Luton tomorrow on Friday. If you're listening to this on Friday, you're listening to it, so we play today. I'm going to say we get a W. I'm going to make that one pretty quick. We don't have to talk about that one too long. So. Liverpool, how are you guys feeling?
Going into the Toon Army, I'm honestly...
Tough game.
I don't know.
Tough game.
I don't know, because I don't know if Klopp is going to start Endo or not. I mean, I elected that he probably will.
Yep.
But, because I don't think you can play that Gakpo hybrid role with the full Klopp. I don't think this is the team to do it against a very solid Newcastle team. So I think if we got out with a draw, I'd be pretty happy.
Okay.
I hate saying that.
No, it's a tough game on the road. St. James's Park is going to be rocking per usual. Tough game. A draw is not a bad result for you guys there. A couple of really good games on the docket for Friday. Real Madrid's playing tomorrow as well. RB Leipzig, who we mentioned earlier. Any thoughts on either of those two games?
I think that the Rafa Benitez revenge tour could be a sneaky result for Celta Vigo.
Interesting.
Even replacing Gabby Vega, I think that they've had a decent start to the season. Now, do I think they'll win? No. If they get it, I could see them getting a draw, a sneaky draw. This is one of those ones that I just have a feeling for some reason, and I think that Leipzig versus Stuttgart. Obviously, Leipzig need to get a win badly.
Yep.
Stuttgart absolutely drugged Bochum last week, so two high-flying teams.
To be fair, Bochum probably bottom of the table again for Germany. So let's just put it out there for that.
5-0.
Yeah, that's a statement. That is a statement. Yep.
So I think Leipzig's going to win that.
Okay.
And I think that when you didn't mention Monaco.
Yeah.
I think that Monaco, like you said, wants to push PSG.
Yep.
PSG off to a good start. So this is the time to build some ground up, but not be like an Arsenal and choke it all away at the end.
Fair enough. Well, perfect. Huge week ahead. Of course, there's still some business to be done in all the leagues. Like I mentioned earlier, window closes in September 1st for Europe. Saudi does close a little later, and they're making a big splash. Again, we can talk about that much more in depth later on. Any concern about this rumor about Mo Salah leaving potentially to Saudi, or no concern?
I think that I don't think Liverpool will cash in.
Okay.
I think that next year we won't.
Interesting.
I think this is Mo's last year. I think that he signed a new contract this year with the expectation, probably like Jurgen had, of an actual rebuild.
Sure.
I think we got half of a rebuild. So I don't think Mo's very happy. Mo wants to win the league. Mo wants to win Champions League.
Yeah.
He's already probably pissed about Europa League on Thursdays.
Yeah.
So I think this is his last year, the Egyptian king.
It'd be interesting, yeah. And there obviously are quite a few other storylines out there. I think, again, with the window closing next week, we'll have a little bit more to talk about as far as transfers. We can review some of the other bigger transfers from the summer, besides Harry Kane, of course, which I think trumps all of those. But one of the segments that we would love to kind of build upon is our best 11 from the weekend. I know you threw yours in here. Feel free to take us through your best 11.
All right, so I'm going to start from keeper all the way to forward.
Okay.
So my keeper, we're now, like I mentioned earlier, the 2 PK saves, and he did concede one, but I mean, when you save 2 PKs, I mean, you kind of just basically stapled yourself as the goalkeeper of the week. Still shout out Allison. He kind of kept us in that Bournemouth game. Now, for my right back, I'm going to go with Frimpong. He was electric. He kind of filled that Diaby void. He's looking lively. Singo is my right center back.
Okay.
Monaco replacing Disasi in Battle of Chile. He looked really good. He's only like 18 or 19 years old. So he's very promising. I'm sure Chelsea will go snap him up.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. I'm sure we'll pay for more money. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe on a 7-year deal.
Yeah.
And then I think Verge, just looking back to himself,
okay.
I think he struggled a little bit this last year, but I think he's looking better. Estupinian from Brighton, he's just been
fantastic.
Yeah. Better than Cucurella.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, well, it's okay. We don't have to get into that.
Naby Keita was not a grade 8, so it's cool to see a guy who's going to really go for it.
And he looked great. He did look good. He looked really good.
The jersey doesn't look heavy on him.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Nice. my second midfielder, James Ward-Prowse. I mean, when you have 2 assists.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we didn't really defend on one of the corners at all. I mean, I think a rec team could have defended better, but that's neither here nor there. He's a great player, great signing by West Ham.
He loves a set piece, so
Yeah.
I think he's going to, at least have 5 to 10 goal involvements just from set pieces.
Just from set pieces, yeah.
And then Enciso, rip.
Yeah.
But he had, his pass to, was it Evan Fergus?
Yeah, Evan Fergus.
Was just top.
And of course, we wish him speedy recovery. Yeah.
He came out good, and this was his year, so I'm bummed.
Yeah.
Vinny Jr., enough said.
Yeah.
Vinny's just Vinny. He's just electric, lightning in the bottle. Matoma, that solo goal.
That goal was fantastic, yeah.
Insane. And then Harry Kane, off the mark for Bayern with a goal and assist.
Yep.
That really doesn't need to be explained.
That doesn't need to be explained. Pretty strong list. I mean, kind of all over the map as far as leagues, which is great. No one dominated league, although plenty of Premier League players there, but quite a few different leagues represented, which is fantastic. Player of the week for you, who's not on your list, but who is your player of the week?
So I purposely did not include the player of the week and the young player of the week because I didn't want to have to.
Fair enough.
So my player of the week was Osimhen. They went down to Frosinone, I think is how you pronounce it, and he came back with 2 goals, and he looked just like his old self. So he's my player of the week.
Can't pick against that. I mean, it's pretty solid. 2 goals, you kind of step it up. And then your young player of the week, we mentioned him earlier, just looked fantastic again and only going to continue to grow. Thoughts on Jude Bellingham?
It's just the kid just fits in with his team. He already looks like a leader with the young guys.
Yeah.
Just how he presents himself. Even with his brother, it's just the Bellingham family is just absurd.
Yeah, fantastic.
Both brothers.
Yeah.
Two goals each.
Yep.
One with the head, one with the right foot.
Yep.
I don't know if that's ever been done.
We'll have to look it up.
But stat check. But how many goal involvements is he going to have this year?
Yeah. Be
What do you
interesting.
think, over 20 goals and assists?
Probably closer to 30, to be honest.
It's crazy to think about.
Crazy to think about. From a non-striker.
20-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
With a big fee, you would think that maybe that would weigh on him.
Yeah.
But he slotted right in, change of formation around. It seems like the team is playing around you.
Yeah.
So that's just, Ballon d'Or in
Potentially.
3 years?
Potentially. Oh, if not sooner.
If not sooner.
Yeah.
I just hope he can stay healthy.
Yeah,
He
me
has so
too.
far, so.
Yeah. Knock on wood for that. Well, we covered a lot here, Daniel. Of course, there's one more segment to go. This is where I mentioned earlier I am the cooler. But that doesn't mean that the fans of the show cannot make some wagers and make some money off of your predictions and your bets. Give us your big bets of the week.
All right, so obviously you could always take, the favorites and the money lines and parlay them, but I think that's boring. So, and I think it's boring to bet the under, so I always bet the over. So a couple overs. I'm gonna have to be selective here. I think that City, Sheffield. I think over 3 is a dumb line.
Yep.
And I think that City is going to completely annihilate.
Interesting. I have a different take on that, but
Really?
keep going. Yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
Okay. I think that Monaco and Nantes, that seems like a goal central.
Agreed.
Even though Singo, the center back, was in my XI, I think that's a young back line that they have going there. And I think that even though Monaco may score a lot of goals, they're also going to concede goals. Another one that I love is the Leipzig-Stuttgart. Both of them over 3. Both of them came out to a hot flying start.
Yep.
We just watched Leipzig score 3 goals.
3 goals.
Concede 4.
Yeah.
And Stuttgart scored 5 goals. They're going to be coming in here pretty bullish, thinking they can maybe get a result against Leipzig. So I think that will be goals. And my last but not least, BVB Dortmund versus Bochum, 3.5. Bochum are awful.
Yeah.
BVB did not look great. I think Terzic is probably pretty pissed off.
I would say a different performance
they're
coming
going
out.
to beat the crap out of them. So 3.5. I think that's might be 5 or 6.
We'll take him to the bank, folks. If you don't win, feel free to hit him up on Twitter, complain about him, and tell him.
This is not financial advice.
I do say the only thing I have differently is I do think City are going to actually potentially get a draw, give up some points in this
They're
game.
not going to win.
I do. I think the situation with Pep and his back injury, not being on the sideline, not being in training, potentially could have an impact on the road. So again, they don't lose, but they also may not get the W. And of course,
they're going to play for Pep.
they may play for Pep. Of course, I was going to say they may win 6-0 just as I'm saying this. But Daniel, appreciate it as always. This is a great take on European football. Of course, we'll be here every week with you guys throughout the season. Please follow us on Twitter. Again, my handle is Life of M. Gesslin. Daniel's is
Liverpool Charlotte.
There you go. And if not, we'll see you in the next one.